Excellent. Here we go. So, as Terry said, this is the third and final session of this. I'm going to miss not doing this next Wednesday. It's been fun. Obviously, in the first session, for those that maybe are going to check it out on the recording later, we talked about market landscapes or the highest level strategy work, advanced SWOT analysis, and technology adoption lifecycle analysis. Last week, we talked about product and company positioning. We reviewed a tool called the Market Opportunity Navigator. Hope some of you checked it out at wheretoplay.co. We went through a deck on sort of tips and tricks on positioning, and I'll get to the hand raise in just one second. We reviewed an example of a positioning audit that I did with a client that I worked with in the past, and similarly talked about the Lean Canvas, which is a tool that many startups are using these days to sort of bring it all together into one page. What are we doing? Who are we doing it for? What's the benefit? All that good stuff. Did somebody raise their hand a second ago?
No, it was accidental. I was just trying to throw a thumbs up that I used the where to play thing with my executive team.
Cool. That's fantastic, Dave. Great to hear that. And then today we're going to talk about go-to-market plan development. The four things that I'm going to focus on, quick overview of a cool framework called the Demand Factory. We're going to talk about the buyer's journey, which is a critical element to figuring out your go-to-market strategies. We're going to dive a little bit into pricing, and then I want to touch on something that's been hot for a few years now in marketing called account-based marketing and what that means. Each of these areas of go-to-market could be an hour and a half workshop, or it could be a 2-day workshop, right? So obviously we're just going to be, going through some of this pretty quickly. You've seen by now that I'm a framework guy. So I like to be able to, figure out a structure for how to think about things. And so if nothing else, that's what we're accomplishing today and in the past few weeks, is just giving you some frameworks to think about and to use so you can go off and use them on your own. As with the previous sessions, shout out a question, raise your hand, type it in the box if you like, and we'll get to it in real time. All right, that's the whole point, is really for me to add some color commentary on top of this stuff. You could just go to the websites and read all this yourself if you wanted to, right? But the value is having me here that you can actually ask questions to, since I've used these frameworks and these tools, on and off for the last couple of decades in some cases. So don't be shy. So let me start with an overview here. I'm not going to do account-based marketing. We're going to start with go-to-market plans. There we have it. Okay. What happens if I share that? That's interesting. Can you guys see the slides right now? Okay, let's keep it that way then. There we are, my scintillating picture from 10 years ago. Don't some of you think that, you look at people's LinkedIn pictures and you think, my God, they don't look anything like that picture anymore. They really should change that picture. I had a meeting yesterday with a guy in Austria. I thought he was 15 years old in his LinkedIn picture. And when I saw him, he had gray hair, and I was like, oh my God. This is a good example of setting expectations in marketing. Don't get too crazy. Okay. What is a go-to-market plan? Is it a plan? Is it a go-to-market model? Is it a go-to-market strategy? Who knows? It doesn't really matter. I'm going to call it a plan because I like the notion of this is the action part of what we're doing here, right? This is when you try to make it real. You're done doing just the thinking. Now you're gonna activate something, right? And so this is my definition, right? It's a go-to-market plan, describes explicit methods that you will use to achieve specific goals with prospects or customers, right? So explicit methods, specific goals. Make sense? So go-to-market plan is the bridge that connects, your company, your strategy, your product to your prospects and customers, to the market, and it's not a coincidence that your solution or product in the go-to-market plan exists within the context of a particular positioning for your product. What are your benefits, your differentiators, your target markets, all that good stuff. And that exists within the overall corporate strategy. And those are the two things we just spent the last 2 weeks talking about. So the go-to-market plan, requires those other things to have a certain level of maturity. Of course, all of these things, including the go-to-market plan, especially for earlier stage startups, like most of us are just hypotheses, right? They're there to test, to learn, to change. So it's not, none of this is set in stone. And so when I think about myself or talk to others about the components of a go-to-market plan, this is what I think of, right? How are you segmenting the market? And we talked a little bit about that in the positioning, and even in the technology adoption lifecycle session. We talked about choosing the bowling pin that you would go after, how you'd break your market into the various bowling pins in the bowling alley, and then decide which one you would target first. Strategic product roadmap is definitely has to be a part of your go-to-market plan. And with a lot of tech startups, you've got the marketing and sales guys over here, and you've got the product guys over here, and never the twain shall meet. It's probably not a good strategy. And it's actually why through most of my career, when I haven't been CEO, I've been a combination CMO and CPO, Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Product Officer, because I think it is very important to have tight alignment between obviously what you're doing in the market and what your product roadmap and product strategy is. Now, it's hard to find people that both have technical and product backgrounds and are also go-to-market demand gen kind of people. And I would say I'm probably more on the product side than I'm on the demand gen side, but I've certainly got enough experience in both sides that I've been able to wear both hats for most of my career. Pricing model and business model, which maybe, this is not identical to the pricing model, distribution, corp comms, demand gen, how you're actually going to engage prospects. That's really another way of saying the sales model, right? The sales engagement model, and then goal and target, goal setting and target setting. So maybe I'll spend a few minutes touching on some of the key things to think about in each of those areas. And again, we're not going to go deep into all of these areas because it's far too much content. But at least here's a framework to think about the elements of your go-to-market model. And often in the past, when I'd start with a client, I'd literally have like a shared Google Doc. I'd list these things out as major headings. And then we just start filling in. What is our business and pricing model? What do we think about distribution? How are we approaching corporate communications? Just start filling the details in to create a straw man go-to-market model overall. So let's see. We did talk about this earlier, and I'll repeat it again. A failure mode is an inability to focus on a particular target market segment, the bowling pin we talked about earlier. And personally, I'm very focused on making that transition for my company from the early market. You might remember from the technology adoption lifecycle, in the very early market days, you are just trying to find early adopters. It sort of doesn't matter what segment or what industry you're focused on. But as the market matures, you have to become focused so you can drive true success in a particular area and then build from there. And that inability to focus or unwillingness to focus, and CEOs are the worst at this, is a major reason for startup failure in technology businesses. Seen it over and over again. Comments, thoughts? All right. I just mentioned this a second ago. So aligning the product roadmap with the go-to-market plan. In fact, it's been a couple of companies I was in where I started as just the CMO. And then the CEO quickly realized that what engineering was building was really not at all aligned with where we needed to go as a company. And that's, I think, the first time I inherited the CPO title, and then it's stuck ever since, basically for exactly this reason, to assure alignment between product and go-to-market. A key thing to think about in the business model and the pricing model is, do you have the ability to actually execute this model? We are going to talk about pricing in a bit more detail here in a couple of minutes, but a key challenge that I've seen in early stage companies is to develop business models and pricing models that are too complex, right? Too complex to implement, too complex to track, And so simplicity, I think, is the key when you're thinking about what your initial early stage business and pricing model can be. Later on, you can layer on levels and complexity and add-ons and all the great stuff, but keep it simple, stupid at the beginning. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I'll just be interested in any thoughts you have as you continue to go through this, but just so that you understand what's going on in our world, and I totally understand now, because of what's going on, the need to align the product roadmap with the go-to-market plan. But we're actually considering a slight pivot in terms of our pricing model and actually going to a freemium model. And I've read many stories about companies going to freemium or away from freemium. We just had a conversation this morning about what that freemium, the impact would be on the product, how we would market it, how it will impact pricing, what the trigger points will be to go from freemium to paid. So again, I'll just be keenly listening in on any thoughts you have in and around that as you continue.
Yeah, it's interesting because your comment there is reminding me that in the little deck I pulled up that describes some different pricing approaches, freemium model was not one of them that I covered in this slide deck, which is ironic because I've used freemium models a few times now, and in general, I'm a fan of the approach. Where startups often run into a problem is they get really good at giving shit away and not nearly as good enough at figuring out how to make money from it, right? And so, freemium needs, I think, at a high level, freemium needs to be thought of as a business, as a go-to-market strategy, not as a pricing model, maybe is the way to think about it, right?
Agreed, for sure.
Yeah, because anybody can give stuff away. Right.
No, it's all about feeding the funnel, but in a much bigger, faster way.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll touch on it more, I think, later. But the other thing that occurs to me off the top of my head is with freemium models, metrics and tracking becomes absolutely critical. Like becoming, dissecting that sales, that marketing and sales funnel. You should be playing probably a higher volume game if you're thinking about a freemium model, right? And so really, doing what's often called growth hacking, right? To see how you can just tweak every lever and every knob to improve your conversion rates from one stage of the funnel to the next, and really understanding the customer life cycle and then tracking metrics through that life cycle. It's always important in any business model, but really important in a freemium model. So we'll touch on all these topics more as we go along. But yeah, it is ironic I didn't put a slide in about a freemium model. I don't know what I was thinking. All right, distribution and partner model. Yeah, we're not going to talk too much more about this one, but this is a real challenge for companies. Is everybody wants to partner with somebody else? People want to partner with you. And of course, I would honestly say 99% of partnerships never turn into anything real in the market, right? They might turn into, at best, a press release, which might give you some brand equity. And there are reasons to do partnerships purely for brand equity, right? If that partner has a better brand than you can borrow some of their brand equity and attach it to your company. But as far as actually getting real deals done, real business done, it takes a level of effort and focus that most early stage companies are not able to devote to this area. And a few of my mentors back in the old days, I was always really excited about it. Let's do this partnership. Let's bring these guys on. Let's put them on our website. And I remember clearly one of my mentors, maybe a couple of decades ago, basically said, "Blaine, stop. Trust me, these are all just going to be, logos on a website. They're not going to do the business any good. I'd rather have one or two really strategic, impactful partnerships than a dozen on our website that aren't actually going to move the needle." So that is a challenge. And right now in my company, I have my sales team working only on end user customer sales. I forbid them from talking to potential partners. I'm the partner guy. So I will deal with analyzing whether I think a partner is the right one to engage with and what strategic value they could bring to us. And of course, we have to bring strategic value to them too, right? If it's not both ways, then for sure it's not going to work. And I don't want my people with their sales hats on trying to, spending their time thinking about this issue, doing strategic partnerships and, all that kind of stuff. So we're not going to talk too much more about partners on this one. Any questions or comments about the partner thing maybe before I move on?
Well, I guess it has been a focus of ours to try to just, so like we picked OFIA, which is like the Ontario, or sorry, OASFE, which is like the Ontario Phys Ed Teachers Union,
Oh yeah.
kind of like get a as a partner. So we got an endorsement from them, and then they just send out emails to all the phys ed teachers in the province, saying, hey, this is the official wellness platform of OFIA or OASFE. And we just did another one with like the CI AAA, and like you can measure the return off them. You do get new sales from them, and they're just, I don't know. So I'm just curious as to like, so we were thinking, well, maybe this is a better way to do it.
I think that's the key. If you actually have partnerships that you can measure the return off of, then those are the right partnerships. Okay. Vast majority of partnerships that tech companies, and I think almost every kind of company engages with, there's some vague, initial excitement about what it could do. And then execution sort of gets halfway there. And then 6 months later, people are, wow, we got nothing from that. So if you've got, and I'm not saying not to partner, don't get me wrong. We've got a couple of critical partners. One is our software is now shipping on these little ASUS edge computer boxes. ASUS has a great global brand in computing. We're able to, leverage their brand value, and they're starting to put us in front of their customers. So, there are absolutely some good partnerships to have, but just I'm just saying, be cautious and selective. And you hit it, Colin. If you can actually measure the impact, that's a good sign. Most partnerships are an unmeasurable impact, right? All right. And then corporate comms. So this is, sometimes referred to as, in the old days, I guess, PR, public relations, but it also includes analyst relations, AR, people that are covering your spaces, includes, you could lump this into social media, although I think right now social media is bridging the gap, you might say, between overall corp comms, brand building, and demand gen. And it's been a continual battle, I guess, to prove the value of social media. Does this stuff we're posting on LinkedIn and Twitter and maybe Facebook and maybe some other sites, is it actually doing anything for us, right? Other than helping to build the brand. My short version on that is, if you've got, something closer to a retail type of product where you're literally selling online and people can click a buy button, then it becomes much easier to justify significant investment in social media. If you're selling more of an enterprise solution, then I would then think of it as more in the corporate comms bucket. This is about Air Wars. It's about giving you, cover for what you're doing. Some of you I know are following me on LinkedIn, and you see we're pretty active on there. It's in my mind, this is all for brand. There's no buy buttons to click. This is just about cementing our position as an expert in edge computing in the market right now. So content marketing, again, that's where I throw, the social media stuff into that wide bucket. Very hot topic these days. And again, I think depending on what your goals are, might be something that you want to focus significantly on. I know we do at Protexo. And then this notion of, standard sales funnel versus account-based marketing. We're gonna dive into that in a little bit of detail in a few minutes. This notion of, self-service sales versus inside sales versus having a true sort of field sales team is an interesting question a lot of companies ask themselves, especially if they're thinking about implementing a freemium model, which by definition is likely to be a self-service model. But a lot of companies that are doing enterprise sales like to think about how they could start with freemium to fill the funnel at the top and then convert it to an enterprise sales model after, which is not impossible. I'll say that it's not impossible. And then of course, I put this at the bottom, but it really should have been at the top, right? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve? even Colin, like your partnership, did you set some goals, some milestones, some targets ahead of time for what you defined as success with this partner? Or did you just go in and start the partnership and, hope it was going to return something? You don't have to answer that question, Colin. It's a hypothetical question, right? But I would say most companies do the latter. They do the partnership. They hope and assume that something good has come out of it, but they have no way of actually judging whether that actually was the case because they didn't think ahead of time what the success criteria were, right? So, and there may be, I'll go back to my ACES example here. I'll be frank, I didn't set hard goals on ACES because my main goal for this partnership was actually to leverage their brand equity and to allow us to tell a story to the market, which is that, and it's a true story, to tell the story to the market that we are an integrated solution for edge computing that includes both hardware and software, plug and play right out of the box. Okay? Without me being able to hold up this little device, that story becomes very hard to tell. So that was strategic. That was a strategic goal we had with this partnership. Now I'm seeing good signs that it will actually result in achieving sales goals and other things as well. But my initial goal was strategic. Actually, it wasn't about ACES selling 500 copies of our software anytime soon. Yes, Dave.
A question on the goals and targets. I mean, outside of obviously sales targets and either some form of lead gen target, whether it be meetings booked or signups or activations, what sort of targets or metrics have you seen be effectively used to measure the efficacy of these efforts? What are some of those ones outside of, hey, are we selling something or not, that are good leading indicators?
Why don't we hold that discussion until we get to the customer journey discussion, because that's when you'll see, there's some content and slides here that are every step in the journey could and should be measured quantitatively. So those would be a good place to set goals around. So when we get to that, we'll talk about that.
Thank you.
All right. So this is called Leslie's Compass, pretty famous, I guess, framework for thinking about go-to-market strategy. And what it basically says is, as you've got products that are more like Crest toothpaste, then marketing is critically important and sales is actually not important at all. As you move toward products that are more like jet engines, then sales becomes the critical thing and marketing becomes very low value, okay? So you can just do your thought experiment right now and imagine, where does your product fit in this scale, I guess, from Crest on the one side to jet engines on the other. Now, this, and I'm going to say it on the next slide, but it goes without saying that, of course, you always, marketing is always relevant, and sales in some sense is always relevant, of course, even if it's just a website that's doing the selling, if it's not a person, right? So I don't love this scale of 0 to 100 because I don't think it's ever 100, nor is it ever 0. But the concept of saying that, on the one end, on the one side here, you've got products where probably marketing matters more, right? When it's cheaper, when you're high volume, many customers to sell to, low complexity, you really understand the fit, exactly what the customer wants. You don't have to have a consultative selling process. Tends to be more likely to be B2C. Oh, what happened there? There we go. And low touch, it's gonna, marketing is obviously gonna be more critical. And when you get to the right-hand side of that scale, sales is. So I think it is an interesting framework to think about, where would you place your product on these dimensions? And what I would actually do is probably even a little exercise where for each of these factors, you and your executive team would sort of rate or estimate, again, using one of these brainstorming tools I've talked about previously, where do you think your product is on the simple to complexity scale? Where is it on the market fit? In other words, out of the box, does this precisely meet the customer need? Or is this something which is going to be a complex solution sale? Every different customer has actually a different version of this jet engine running, right? There's no out of the box jet engine sales, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it would be an interesting exercise with your exec team to go through and figure out where you sit on each of these, and then to see overall where you end up on this framework. More info about this in this link that you'll get a hold of when we send out the deck. Yeah. So marketing, of course, is never zero. And me being a lifelong marketer, my first thought when my previous CEO sent this to me is, I said, "Oh, so you're laying me off, right? That's it. So marketing is going to zero." And he didn't lay me off. But even for selling jet engines, all these elements of what I would call marketing are critical. So without marketing, you don't have product positioning, launch planning, launching a new version of your jet engine, all the sales collateral and support you need to support the sales team, the partners you need. Of course, a jet engine doesn't live on its own. It has to be inside of something, right? Communications. And of course, even PG&E or Procter & Gamble has salespeople going around pitching, trying to find shelf space for Crest, and et cetera. So sales is never zero either, but interesting framework, I think. Any questions about this framework before I move on? Another framework I hope many of you have seen. If not, rush over to pragmaticinstitute.com, or it used to be pragmaticmarketing.com, and take a look at their pragmatic marketing framework, because this is actually a great tool and again, a framework to use to think through all the elements of, the more strategic side of creating a product and bringing it to market, all the way to the execution side. And in the live version, why does that keep happening? In the live version of this framework, which is on the website, you can click into each of these and get an explanation for specifically what they mean. One of the things I've done in audits with customers and companies in the past is I'll use this framework and basically go through an assessment for this company of the state of their, maturity, you might say, in terms of every one of these factors. On defining the market problem, they're a 9 out of 10. They haven't even begun doing win-loss analysis yet, so they're a 0. Are they very clear on what makes them differentiated? Yeah, they did the lean canvas and the analysis we talked about earlier, so they've got a good beat on that. They're a 7 out of 10. Go through and look at this framework as a way of rating, of doing a self-assessment, right, of how you're doing in terms of bringing all these pieces together. So really, really cool tool. And some of these things may not be necessary right now, right? It's not important that you don't need to be a 10 out of 10 on all these things, right now, but you should at least sort of know where you are. And then what I would again do with clients is say, okay, what are the next 3 boxes that you want to focus on for the next quarter? Right? What are the next 3 areas you're going to focus on as a company to try to improve your score there? Okay, right. We really want to focus on revenue retention. Like, that's critical. We're really good at bringing customers online. We're not very good at retaining them. So this is going to be our focus area for the next quarter, or whatever the case is. It's a really great framework. Check it out online. Questions or comments about this? Has anybody used this framework before? Anybody?
No.
Holy mackerel. Okay, well, there you go. Go to pragmaticmarketing.com, check it out. It's definitely worth not only the framework, but actually subscribing to their newsletters and their content. They produce a lot of great content that I would describe as the product marketing bucket, which is sort of the blending of the product side and the go-to-market side is usually sort of held in this bucket called product marketing. And companies tend to be, a little more mature before they hire their first official product marketer. Until then, it's often the CEO that does that job, like I'm doing. But the content on pragmatic marketing is just fantastic for helping you think through many of these frameworks that we're talking about. So highly recommend. All right, and like with anything else, team alignment. A few weeks ago, I think we talked about the strategic alignment survey. Did anybody do that with their team yet? The strategic alignment survey tool that we talked about a few weeks ago? No? Come on, don't be afraid. don't be afraid of finding out you're all on a different page and you don't agree on your core strategy and approach to the market. It'll be really interesting to learn that. So definitely take a look at that. I gave you a link in the slides a couple of weeks ago, so take a look for that link. Yeah, and okay, I think the third point is really important. Your go-to-market strategy is not the sole responsibility of the marketing department, right? This, when you think of all the things that are in here: pricing, communication, sales enablement, sales team structure. If you're saying to whoever is doing your marketing, you take care of that, then you're probably taking a big chance, even if that person is a very senior, experienced person, right? This has to be owned by the CEO and by the executive team, not just by one person, right? We've talked about this point as well before. It still applies to go-to-market planning as well. Quarterly reviews, probably more important. I think before we talked about maybe it's every 6 months you revisit the SWOT or the talc stages, but because this go-to-market stuff is more tactical, right? It's more on the tactical end, then it probably does need to be officially revisited more frequently than the more strategic ones. And, I would recommend once a year, you basically say, okay, let's just forget about what if we were to start over right now? Hey, what would we be doing differently today, right? Do a start over exercise, because most of these strategic exercises and planning things tend to be incremental, right? How can we make this a little bit better? And maybe if you were able to start with a blank slate, you'd do something entirely different. You'd go from, a high-priced pilot model to a freemium model, if you were able to start over. So that's, I think, an interesting idea of thinking about it as a reset. And yeah, the last one, we've also talked about this before: bring an outsider perspective to avoid groupthink, especially to avoid the hippo issue. The highest paid person in the room makes all the decisions, right? That's not a good place to be. So board members, advisory board members, maybe, bring in a consultant if you can find a good one or afford one to help bring that outside perspective. That's never a bad idea to avoid groupthink on these things. And I think that's it for this one. So any questions or comments about this high-level framework for go-to-market planning before we move into the demand factory? That's what we're going to move into next. All right, let's talk about demand factory. You guys can see this factory looking thing on my screen here. All right, cool. So this came from a organization, I know the group and I know the CEO well, called demandgen.com. So you can go to demandgen.com and find them. Similar to pragmaticmarketing.com, I'd highly recommend you go to demandgen.com, subscribe to their newsletter, start listening to their podcast, subscribe to their podcast series, great interview series with thought leaders on marketing, go-to-market, demand generation that they have. The CEO of this company, demandgen.com, is a great thought leader in the space. And this is, the high level model. If you go to their website, that you'll see there, they sort of structure their business around. You've got the acquisition phase, right? So, all the ways you generate leads: content marketing, search, general advertising, mobile to mobile web. You got all your data starting to be created. Then you're in the green area, which is the conversion phase. So you've got these raw leads coming in, and you got to convert them to marketing qualified leads, to sales accepted leads, and sales qualified leads. Then once you actually turn them into a customer, you want to expand them, right? Onboard, upsell, of course, retain for the long term. And then you've got the marketing metrics and measurement organization here, right? In our factory, which is about making sure that we're actually tracking that this whole thing is working properly and working to constantly optimize it. And again, a little interesting exercise could be to just even at a high level, do a self-assessment or a team assessment of what's working well and what's not working in each of these 4 buckets. What are we doing today, well, in terms of demand gen, in terms of conversion, in terms of expansion or retention, and then in terms of measurement. And that's sort of the point of the little bullets on the right here. So I think that's a very useful exercise, and I definitely would recommend, again, you guys check out Demand Gen, subscribe to their stuff, and really start to get into some of the deeper elements of this demand factory, and to figure out exactly what version, I guess, of the factory works right or best for your business. You can see in the middle of the demand factory, we've got account-based marketing. And that's why I'm going to talk about account-based marketing just in a couple of minutes here, because it's interesting. But first, let's dive into the buyer's journey. All right, let's do that. Oh, got to move my zoom out of the way here. Here we go. Buyer's journey. Okay, one slide. Perfect. So what is the buyer's journey? Right? It's putting in place that framework for the stages that your prospects will go through before they become a customer. And I think you've all seen probably this kind of framework before. There's different acronyms and different ways of expressing it. The one on the slide here, you go through the awareness stage, then you're considering purchase, and you actually make a decision to purchase, and then you become hopefully a loyal customer after. Right? At a super high level, those are the stages. But of course, every company is different. And I think a very important, process to go through is to really think through and map out what is the particular buyer's journey for your customer, your target market, right? For your customer set. And you may actually have different buyer personas that have different journeys. For example, my company has a technical buyer persona, which might be the CTO or a CIO. They've got their particular path to navigate from awareness all the way to purchase. I've also got a very different buyer persona, which is a line of business owner, more on the business side. They run the manufacturing operation, or they own the oil rig, or whatever the case is. Those people are not technical. They've actually got a very different buyer journey, right? And so we've actually had to create two different buyer's journeys. And what we've done is, back when we were living in the real world, we literally mapped out these buyer's journeys on walls of a room, and had pages that looked at all the different stages, and we kept remapping and changing this actually over a period of months. In fact, we kept this thing live for over 2 months, because as we kept learning and testing, we kept rearranging the sub components of the buyer journey, the things that the buyer has to go through, the thought process they're going through as they're making the decision. Everything was mapped out, and then of course we tested in the real world. And then, no surprise, the buyer's journey has a correspondence to the good old-fashioned sales funnel, right? So many of you are probably using some kind of CRM system, HubSpot maybe, or something like that, to track how your customers move from raw leads to an MQL marketing saying this is a valid company in our target market that we should engage with, to an SQL saying, a sales guy saying, yes, I agree, I am actually engaging with that prospect. And then the opportunity stage usually has a number of sub stages in it, where you're tracking different levels of engagement, which we'll get into in a second with the account-based marketing. And then finally, they become a customer, hopefully not a past customer. So back to the question about measurement, part of the value of having a buyer's journey mapped out is then you start tracking your conversion rate between these different steps in the buyer's journey, right? Who's actually achieving, going from the suspect to making an inquiry to becoming MQL, et cetera. It gives you a framework to use to track progress, and to be able to then do experiments in your go-to-market model to see if changing the price, if adding a freemium model, if adding an inside sales rep, if doing whatever actually affects the metrics that you're tracking as part of the buyer's journey. So you can do hypotheses and start running experiments in your GTM based on the buyer journey. And of course, doing significant changes to your GTM might actually the point might be to change the buyer's journey. Maybe you didn't have an SDR, sales development representative, a junior inside salesperson before, but you think it would be valuable for you to insert that part into the buyer's journey, because the jump from initial awareness to actually talking to a senior salesman about a solution is too big a jump. And you see that your fall off rate is so high in that element of the buyer's journey that you thought if you had an intermediate step in that journey, talking to an SDR, having a quick conversation around qualification and interest, then you can have a higher conversion rate as you finish your way through that journey. So some ways you might think about changing your buyer's journey, but the first thing I would do is document what it is. And actually, I'm going through the example I gave you before about the sticky notes was actually a previous company. I'm actually literally going through a process like this right now with my company, with a consultant we've hired actually, who's helping us really document and nail this thing down. But you don't have to start there. Start on your own and just get this journey ball rolling. Any questions about this one or comments? Has anybody actually officially mapped out their buyer's journey before? Is it written down or documented? Yes, Colin?
Yeah, we have like we created from that Dan Martell course we signed up for, we did like a sales playbook. So we've mapped it all out in our playbook. The idea is when we hire people in, they can just you have this document already ready that they can just self-train on almost from beginning to end. So we've done it. I like some of the tools and like the way you present things better. Like it's much nicer than ours, but so yeah. But we're
thanks, Colin.
Yeah, we do try. Like, we put a good effort towards figuring out at what point we're lacking efficiencies, right? Is it the original cold outreach? Is it marketing? Is it once we get into the conversation, are we not converting them into a demo, and are we not converting from demo? So we are monitoring it. We use HubSpot as a tool.
Oh, good. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, one thing, and HubSpot is, we use HubSpot as well. I love the tool overall. One thing that is important to consider is often people only start thinking about these kind of journeys once sales gets involved. So then it becomes the sales funnel kind of thing, right? Which is like the thing on the right. But we just got to keep in mind that the buyer journey, and it sounds like you're doing this, the buyer journey begins long before a salesperson, ever talks to anybody, right? And depending on the business you're in, we know in most B2B type of businesses, something like 60 to 70% of the buyer's journey happens before anybody ever actually talks to one of your people, right? They're going to the website, they're seeing you on social media, they're getting referrals, whatever the thing is. By the time you get to sales, they're well into the buyer's journey. So don't think that the buyer's journey starts with sales. That's for sure. Any other comments here before we move on to the next thing?
I got one more. So
Sure.
Where does your website essentially fit into the buyer's journey then? Within this, is it an entirely separate piece that you're monitoring? Are you putting totally different metrics on that? Because it's kind of entwined into this, but
totally. Yeah.
To me, it's our first salesperson, right? That's our lead salesperson.
So definitely, to the point that 70% of the selling process happens before somebody talks to a salesperson. A lot of that probably is about your website. But I will say the vast majority of website metrics are they're pretty meaningless. They're vanity metrics, is how they're often referred to, right? Oh, our website visitors went from 500 last month to 700. We're successful, or average time on site went from 1 minute, 2 seconds to 1 minute, 22 seconds. Let's give marketing a raise. In reality, all that matters is that you are actually converting more people to different stages in the sales funnel. And I would say many website metrics are again, they're not that meaningful at the end of the day, unless you can prove that increasing website visitors actually does cause more people to trial your product or to request more information, or, and we'll talk about this in account-based marketing in a second. It's about engagement with a customer that matters. It's engagement metrics that really matter. It's not things like viewing, a page or coming to a website. Yeah, Jonathan.
On the side, we are actually dealing with a big corporation bank, and it's very organic the way that we have been able to win customer. Some have been referred by our investor, some other, like example, Desjardins, we won the competition, the cybersecurity competition. So we tried to really find a kind of a pattern that have been repeatable for every of those big corporations. Pretty much the only example, the first step of our playbook right now is pretty much found the shortest path to integrate the pilot into the big co. And this is, I would say, the most general and the most, I would say, representative step that we are doing with every big co. Is this because we're missing sample before that we are building that type of diagram, or this is definitively something that we have to find the best pattern like we are doing right now?
No, I think sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. And it's the exact same thing my company is doing right now, because our buyer's journey, which isn't really fully reflected here, is one that goes from, the initial awareness to probably a technology test, to a pilot or POC, to a land deal, and then to an expand deal. That's exactly what the buyer's journey looks like for my company as well. A little different than this simplified thing I'm showing on the screen right now. And yeah, I agree. And I've got the exact same challenge as you have, trying to accelerate the path from pilot, which is usually fairly easy, relatively low cost, to the initial real, a customer deal that is the biggest hurdle that I'm also working to overcome right now. So sounds like you're on the right path here, John.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep, good for you. Marianne.
Hi, yeah, like similar to Jonathan, we work with banks too. For example, we were talking about website. We use our website mostly just for to appeal for recruiting and maybe investors. We don't expect any customers ever to go to our website. But we do have LinkedIn, and we use LinkedIn a lot for trying to attract eyeballs to what we are doing. And like I know that the CEO has 5,000 people now on LinkedIn, which is really nice. So whenever we make an announcement, then a lot of people will see that. And also we do the thing with the pilots too. So similar to what Jonathan said, we do a lot of those incubators. A lot of the banks are doing incubators, and it's really for them to find startups, to give them ideas, and maybe to just new blood, I guess, right? But for us, it's really useful because it's very difficult to see inside a bank and know who to talk to. There are a lot of different buyer personas for us as well. Well, there are a lot, and a lot of times the only people that we can get a hold of are not decision makers, and actually they tend to not want us to be involved. So by going through the incubator route, it really is helpful for us. And so ours is fairly organic too. It's more like, let's get a few customers and then word of mouth or FOMO. Like FOMO is kind of the thing that we're going for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that brings you touched on a lot of topics there. I think one thing is I think using the incubator as a sales strategy is really interesting. And you're right, a lot of companies, whether it's banking, energy, a lot of large organizations these days do have incubators, which they're using as their innovation groups fundamentally, and they're looking for partners to help them. So that's a very innovative way, I think, of driving a go-to-market. You also made a comment about Nobody goes to our website. The customers never go to our website. I wonder, I would, that might be true.
That's a guess.
I would be surprised, a little bit surprised by that, because, I'm sure that's true for most of us is, you find out about something, or even you find somebody on LinkedIn. I'll tell you, one of the first things I do when I see a potential partner or an interesting looking company on LinkedIn is I go to their LinkedIn page, and then I click that button that says on LinkedIn, go to website, because I want to see how they're positioning themselves, are they a serious company? Are they, and I'll tell you, I was even surprised to find this. The most popular page on protexo.com today is not the platform page. It's not the AI page, which is sort of sexy. It's the About Us page. And that doesn't surprise me, because mostly we're trying to sell to large companies like Jonathan and like you, Marianne. And these guys want to know, are these guys real? Is this a real company? Do they have employees? Is this, what is this? And so that they're going to the About page to really figure out what kind of company we are, not really to learn about our solution nearly as much as to learn about our company. So yeah, maybe nobody's going to your website, but I would want to test that if I was you, because I think we're just trained now to go to check out a company's website way early in the buying process. Doesn't matter what we're selling. It's just a default thing that we do now. We were trained, by the web over the last 20 years. The last thing you brought me to mind is actually, I think I'm going to touch on it in the next section here, but around a really great book and a framework called The Challenger Customer. And it's too bad, because I'm actually, right after this meeting, I blocked off some time to prepare a session I'm doing tomorrow for my company on the Challenger Customer, little training session, sort of like this, all around the topic of the Challenger Customer. And it's mostly focused around selling more complex products and solutions, although I think to some degree it could be applied to anything. But it's fundamentally about how do you break through the current way of thinking, right? Especially if what you're selling is anything about innovation, right? How do you break through that? How do you plant a message in the prospect's mind, which is truly unique and causes them to go, whoa, I've got to check this out. I've got to learn more about this. I've got to get past this initial resistance. That's what the Challenger Customer is all about. And especially if you're in B2B, I would absolutely recommend you read the Challenger Customer. It's somewhat less relevant to high volume B2C stuff, but B2B super relevant. Marianne, back to you, and then we'll go to James.
Right, thanks, Blaine.
Okay.
I was just wondering, I didn't see anything around content creation. I found that our company really focused on content creation to be seen as a thought leader and also a paradigm shift in the market.
Yep.
That was my first comment. But I had our challenge is that our buyer persona, our customers, also then, because we're introducing new technologies, new methods, then they're really interested, and they take it in, and then they give it to they're our early adopters, and then take our technology, give it to their early adopters, and then they have a buyer's journey, right? And then you then have these different verticals, from banking to government to this and that, and each one has a different buyer's journey, right? And your sales guy is like, oh, well, you know what, this guy 3 months, this guy 18 months, this guy 3 years, and then the marketing guy is like, well, this is really hard to and that's what we chose one to focus on. But even that, then it's still the same thing. Then, so for example, we chose telecommunications. They have banks, government, and of course enterprise. And it's just, especially in the emerging deep tech. It's I've done a lot of the commercializations, but from graphene, stuff like that, and coming from banking. But this quantum stuff is like nothing I ever seen, because it's like before, when the governments are trying to put the man on the moon, or man or woman on the moon, right? It really didn't matter about landing on the moon, but it's really kind of like, how do I get all this money from the government? And next year I'm in this space. So then you're marketing not even to an actual customer need problem, but more so, hey, I want to get some of the government's money.
Yeah. Yeah, well, good points, and I like this image you caused in my mind of this sort of almost nested buyer journeys, multi-level buyer journeys. All the more reason to actually sort of try to map this out and visualize it and figure it out versus trying to just spitball it, which becomes really complicated. The more complicated and again, we sort of got a similar thing because we're selling. The goal is actually to sell mostly through partners, systems integrators, and others. So we've got a buyer's journey to get them involved in our project, but then they have a buyer's journey along with us to get their customers involved in the project, right? And so you do have, at least with us, a 2-level buyer journey, but it could be a lot more complicated. I think Marianne, you have your hand up. Oh, go ahead, James. Finish your thought.
I just want to say to Marianne, I came from banking with RBC for 12 years. The people you want to talk to in the banks, right, are people that have a budget, and if you definitely want to be talking with them basically in September, October at the latest, because that's when they're doing all their budgets for next year or finalizing them. So you really want to get them kind of like near the end of summer. And not only do you want to talk to people with the budget, but you need to basically talk to the people that are going to get you on the approved vendor list. Because at the end of the day, if you're not on that approved vendor list, they're not going to buy from you.
Yeah, for us, it's a really, really long sales cycle, so we don't need to time it. And it's really hard because those people that control the budget don't know what we're talking about. So we really have to get into, more the people that understand what we're selling, and then they have to bring those people on board afterwards.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to say, hey, for example, right, like don't try to get the whole contract at once. So say, hey, I need 100K for them to understand what my technology does, what the technology evaluation guys get that budget guy to approve that, and then you're off to the races with the other guys. And once that's done, you take the results, right? You get another budget.
Yeah.
Right?
So we do that with the pilot. And so would you say that 100K is kind of like that sweet spot?
Yeah. I say, yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah. 100K is usually, I'll say, is the sweet spot for the banks, for different areas too. But it's just that number is kind of like something where a VP usually can approve.
Interesting. All right. Now it looks like Ray has a hand up. Is that right? I see Ray had raised a hand here.
Let me, I don't know if it was from previous,
okay,
from the previous question, but.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's keep moving on. We've got about 25 minutes left. A couple more things I want to cover here. It's probably more than 25 minutes worth of content. So let's see. I'm hearing a little bit of background chatter. You guys okay? Yeah, okay. Since you're all on mute now, it's silenced out, so all good. Why don't we do this? Since we don't have too much more time left, I did say I would touch on pricing strategy. Rather than go through these slides in detail, I'd rather spend more time on account-based marketing, and I think it's relevant to more relevant. And I will send these slides to Thierry so you can take a look at your own leisure. But I think at a super high level about pricing, again, the tendency is to want to just dive in and figure out, okay, we're going to charge $25 a month, right? That's our pricing model. And I think it is important to start with strategy, right? What are your goals for your overall pricing program? What are you trying to achieve from it? Again, for example, if market penetration is a key goal, that's a great reason to use a freemium model, right? Because you just want to get your solution as widely distributed as possible initially, maybe before competitors do the same thing. That'd be a great reason to use a freemium model. But some of these other models might not be as amenable to a freemium model, right? And then the slide deck here does go through some different bases for setting your pricing, especially your pricing levels. It's actually not so, this is probably more about the levels than it is about the model, okay, right? So do you look at how competitors are priced their products, and do you base your price on that? Do you pick a middle point, right? Or do you pick a high point relative to your competition because you want to show you want to have a premium brand, right? You want to position yourself higher, better, stronger, faster than competition. Maybe it's cost plus pricing, which is very transparent for the market. You can say, look, here's what it costs us to do the solution. We'll put a 15% markup on top of that. Total transparency. we're all in this together. There's advantage to that kind of product, that kind of pricing model. Market penetration, we talked a little bit about already, especially popular and freemium pricing. I'd say a lot of companies are, though, trying to do number 4, value-based pricing, right? Let's figure out what this is worth to the bank, and then we'll take 10% of that value or 20% or something. They still keep 80, right? So it's a win-win. They're getting 80% of the value, we're only taking 20% of the value. Of course, the disadvantage of this one is it's the hardest one to figure out, right? Because how do you estimate value? Right now, I'm working on an ROI calculator actually for the energy industry that we're targeting to help us actually help the market estimate what the value is. So then we can say, okay, well, look, we're only charging you, a tiny fraction of the value you're going to generate from doing this thing. So that's going to be our attempt at using value-based pricing by helping the customer understand the value, right? And then we have a basis for expressing our own value. So in the slides here, it goes through more detail on sort of tips and tricks and things to think about for each of those pricing models. All right, and Thierry will distribute those afterward. Quick questions about pricing before we move on, or comments? Buyer's journey.
I have one question about pricing. Like, would you,
Sure.
is there a section that, I guess my question is, in each one of those ones that you just showed, is there like a range of price that fits best within those sections? So like, if you're going to go value to customer, like, is that typically between like $50,000 to $150,000? And like, if you're going to go penetration to market, are you talking like $25-30 a month?
Yeah.
Like, which one fits best?
Yeah, it's of course totally dependent on the market, the product, what the competitors are doing, and that's why, before you start with a pricing exercise, you should start with a market audit. Try to understand as much as you can about what are the going rates. If you don't have any direct competitors, then for comparable products and solutions, right? Because whether a value price is $25 or $200,000 depends all totally on the market and the landscape and the competition and everything else, right? So it's impossible to set a level there at that. But start with the market analysis and then take it from there. Looks like you spurred something, Colin. So Marianne, you're next.
Right. We'd love to do value-based pricing for sure, because our product, we think, is huge value, to the banks. But right now we're doing a kind of a market penetration strategy, as we don't have any competitors right now, and we really want to grab as much as the market as possible. But what I'm wondering is, like, how easy is it for us to go from number 5 to number 4, later on? Like, so we'll figure out what the value is later. Right now we're just focusing on market penetration.
Yeah, and that's easy is one thing. Easy, nothing is easy, right. But I would say it is a very common approach to do that. Right, early on, you start with market penetration pricing, or I would even call it, hypothesis pricing. Right, let's just get some things out there. Let's test some. Just this morning, I was talking to my chairman for my pricing model, and he suggested, let's just double all the prices. Let's just double all the prices. And at first I thought, well, what? But then it became obvious. Look, right now at this early stage, everything is being negotiated anyway. Let's not anchor low. Let's anchor higher. And then while we're doing that, we will find out more about what the values we're delivering. We'll get a bead on that, and it'll be easier to switch, later to a pricing level that is more reflective of value. Right now, this is more about a negotiation starting point, right?
It's just that we have a kind of land and expand sort of thing going. So it's hard. Like I just wonder, I just remember when I was a student and I was able to buy bananas for 27 cents a pound. And then I could never find them for that price again. And so then I just never bought them. I'm like, oh, I'll just wait, because I was poor. And I just wonder, like if we go into a company and we're at this price, and then, later we're like, okay, well, now our prices have increased. I mean, do we, okay, like specifically for banks, is that kind of normal? For
Yeah,
them? Like,
yeah.
should they expect it and not be too, incensed by it?
Well, it become, I'm not an expert on the Canadian banking industry pricing in Canada, but I would
Not
just say
just
that,
Canadian, yeah.
yeah, but you do want to have a flexible pricing model. And this relates to the topic of how much do you try to lock customers into long-term pricing, where you then aren't able to raise prices later. And it's always a balance, right? I think most early stage companies would love to lock customers into longer term contracts and give up maybe for 3 years the ability to raise prices significantly. But you got to play that one on a case by case basis, I would say. Did somebody else have a question here before I saw a hand?
Actually, yes, but Marianne asked the question that I got before, but is this possible to start a contract saying we're gonna go, because in the cybersecurity, it's really hard to know how much the bank is investing into the cybersecurity, and even harder to know what is the slice example of the identity access management into the whole package of cybersecurity that they're investing on. So is it possible to say, we're gonna make the cost plus pricing, and as soon as we're gonna hit that kind of point, that target or that limit or an acceptance criteria, we're gonna switch to a value-based pricing or something like this? Is this something common or that you already see in a big core?
Yeah, that strikes me as challenging, except because if you start with cost plus pricing, then you're telling them your cost model basically. And then later on, they're going to say, well, I know how much it's costing you to do this. Now you want me to pay 10 times as much? I don't think so. Right. But the way around that, I guess, and we're doing this as well, is it's about having a separate pricing model for pilots and POCs. It's not your standard pricing model. Right? For a pilot or a proof of concept, yeah, it is sort of like cost plus pricing because it's a custom engagement. We're doing a lot of custom technical work. It's the pilot is 20 grand, whatever the number is. We know that when we get into the real world, the pricing is not at all based on the pilot pricing. It's just two totally different models, right? So it's not so much of changing the pricing model from one to another. It's two different products even. You've got a pilot product, which is priced one way, and then you've got a production product, which is priced a whole different way. That's probably an easier way to make this jump in a customer's mind.
Makes total sense. Thank you.
Okay, let's go. We're going to learn about account-based marketing in 15 minutes or less, which is actually impossible. But I'll give you a teaser about what this is all about, and you may find that it's certainly those of you that are on the B2B side, like the banking stuff we've been talking about. This is extremely relevant. On the the B2C side, like what Colin is doing, somewhat less relevant, but I think there are certainly some principles here that could be applied. So let me go through this pretty quickly. So account-based marketing is taking this notion of one-to-one personalized marketing. Became really popular when the web came up in the early 2000s. You got a message that you can deliver exactly to that person. It's what Amazon.com does, every day to all of us, and trying to apply that kind of targeting to the B2B side, right? And it also accounts for the fact that we know most of these B2B buying decisions are group buying decisions. It's not one person making a decision. It's on average, according to the Challenger customer, 5.6 decision makers are involved in every enterprise purchase cycle right now, right? 5.6 people on average. So how do you sell something when you're not selling to one person, you're selling to a group of people, right? And then finally, this is about aligning what marketing is doing with aligning what sales is doing in this context. So let me give you just a high level taste of it. And by the way, on demandgen.com, the website I showed you before, a lot of good content on account-based marketing. And there's also another company which has solutions for account-based marketing, which has a lot of great content. It's Demandbase. So not DemandGen, it's called demandbase.com. Check them out, and you'll find also great ebooks and all kinds of stuff where you can dive a little deeper on account-based marketing. But fundamentally, so-called funnel marketing, which most B2B companies have been doing historically and still do today, is marketing does some stuff up here. They generate leads, and then they're converted by sales development representatives and then account executives, and then a deal gets closed. So marketing does some magic up here, LinkedIn, something, who knows? And then finally a sales guy, gets a hold of this lead and tries to convert it. And account-based marketing says something quite different. Rather than, random leads coming in with a fishing net, trawling through the whole ocean, you pick the named accounts that you're going to target. Okay, you say, these are the 10, 50, 100, whatever the number is, accounts that we're going to target. You set up account plans. You identify who are the people, and then it's not just one person, because remember, this is account-based marketing instead of contact-based marketing, right? So you're marketing to an account, not to a person. You identify the team of people that need to be engaged with at that company. Then you drive that engagement. You measure the engagement over time, and then you keep repeating that. Ooh, let's do that again. I like that. There you go. Wow. Isn't that cool? It took me like hours to figure that out. It's unbelievable. You keep driving increasing engagement levels with this account until finally you hit that level where you move forward in the selling process. So that's account-based marketing. Does it work? It does. People who use this methodology, a lot higher ROI than their standard marketing initiatives. Close rates 75% higher, deal sizes 26% higher. So B2B companies that use this approach are successful with it, and I've used it myself. And this example I'm going to run you through really quickly is literally what I did at a previous company to implement account-based marketing. So the steps are: identify your target account types that you're going to focus on. For some, it's easy, large Canadian banks greater than 500 million in assets or whatever, right? But for some of you, it may be a lot more complex to identify who those target accounts are. Then once you've got the account types, you identify the actual accounts. Who are the companies that you're going to target? Then you create relevant messaging for each of the account types, right? Now, even better would be able to, if you've got a very small list, like you're only targeting 8 banks, then you can actually create relevant messaging at the actual account level, okay? Based on, what their strategic plans are from their, their quarterly filings, all this good stuff, what their hot buttons are. You can be personalized literally at the account level. But if you're shooting with a slightly wider, a little bit more of a shotgun, then you're probably personalizing to the account type. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Then you engage not just one individual, but all the relevant stakeholders with that specific messaging that would be meaningful to them, right? Don't wait for them to fall into your funnel. You proactively engage with them. You measure that engagement. And again, for those of you that are using HubSpot, they have begun to do actually more and more with account-based marketing, because HubSpot and Salesforce used to be really all about contacts. It's a contact database, right? But HubSpot is, and pretty well every system has now realized that selling to individuals is not nearly as effective as selling to organizations. And so they're making it easier and easier to do these things and to measure the results of these things. So for example, in HubSpot, you can not only see what person went to your website, but how many people from that company visited your website in the last week, right? And you can measure that level of engagement across that company over time. That's one example of engagement measure for account-based marketing. And of course, this, account-based marketing, it's actually, that's probably a bad word for it. It was invented by a buddy of mine who was a marketer. And so he called it account-based marketing, but it's really account-based marketing and sales is what it is, because this is about sales and marketing being totally aligned in how they engage the market. The old funnel marketing was marketing did something and then sales did something, right? Now it's about marketing and sales working together to drive that continuous cycle of engagement with the prospects. Okay, I'm going to take you through a rapid fire example of what we actually did at a previous company. So hold on to your seats. So we identified we were targeting these high-level industries: financial services, healthcare, travel, and hospitality. This is a big data analytics product that I was selling. We looked at those, and the ones in green, we said, these are the subsegments that have characteristics that we think are very relevant to our product. Okay. We ended up with 5 categories overall and 1,700 target accounts. Again, this is a mid-sized 500-person B2B company with a fairly generic tool, big data analytics. I would not recommend a small early-stage startup gets 1,700 accounts. That's not account-based marketing. Start with a much lower list, okay? Much smaller list, but I had resources and people that could handle this kind of scale. But you don't have to start this big. Start much smaller. 10 companies. Same principles apply. This is not about verticalization. This is about relevance, right? This is not saying we're going to have a vertical-based approach. It's saying we want to deliver the most relevant message to each company that we possibly can and to the key stakeholders. And then we identified who are the actual companies that we want to identify. And these were some examples of logos that we said we are going to target those folks. Okay, yeah. How did we identify them? We pulled a list of restaurant franchisors, looked at revenue, location, a bunch of factors, and that's how we picked who they were. And then, okay, this is where it gets more interesting. For the restaurant franchisors, there was like 75 of these guys. We created, a very specific set of messaging that's just for them. Okay, we did the same thing for the supermarket boys and for the retail franchisors that weren't doing restaurants. So we started to create some relevant and specific messaging to each of these subsegments, all 14 segments. Again, I doubt you're going to have 14 segments. Maybe you'll have 2, right? But we were able to do it for 14. And again, continued down the path of creating, relevant messages, in this case for the restaurant franchisors. And then we began to push that relevant messaging out to all the individuals that were a restaurant franchise chain like Subway. We identified who are the top 10 executives or decision makers in Subway that we want to target, and we started sending out these relevant messages to them. In fact, in this example, we send out physical books because that were custom printed for each individual company, right? Because we could do this. Yes, Colin, go ahead.
Would you use something like Zoom Info to get leads? Is that how you would get people? Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, Zoom Info is how I would help identify companies, identify the buyers. Of course, LinkedIn and LinkedIn Navigator in particular is also really good. Zoom Info is great, very expensive. LinkedIn Navigator is great at identifying stakeholders because they're advanced searching capability that regular LinkedIn doesn't have. But then you probably have to use a tool like hunter.io, which will actually give you the email addresses of these people that you then found in LinkedIn, because LinkedIn won't give you the email addresses.
Or Zoom Info does.
Yeah, Zoom Info. Zoom Info is great. Again, if you can afford it, it is tends to be a pricey solution, but yeah, Zoom Info has great data. I'm going to skip this a little bit. Okay, so you saw that let me go back here. You saw that we created messaging for the different types of accounts, the different categories. And again, if you're only targeting 8 people with your eight companies with your ABM, then you should be able to create specific messaging for that account, not just for categories of accounts. This command of the message thing is all about, okay, now it's no good if marketing is sending out these specific messages, but sales doesn't know them. So you have to have sales make sure they have the so-called command of the message for these different account types. So both groups are saying the same thing, delivering the same message when you do a customer engagement. And this was back to restaurant franchisors. This was a messaging guide. I think it was Colin, mentioned a sales playbook. Well, this was actually in our sales playbook for sales guys who were going out to talk to restaurant franchisors, the kind of messages that is not a generic message about our company, but was specific to the value we were delivering to this particular segment. And we even broke it down to the persona level, because you can see these restaurant franchisors, they've got different people that work in their organizations, and we did persona, little persona profiles for each of these things that could help us get the message even more specific. But again, I'm a little worried here that I'm scaring the crap out of everyone. You don't have to be this sophisticated or go this deep right off the bat to have effective account-based marketing. The basic principle is identify the target accounts and then craft and deliver personalized messages and then measure the engagement. Another thing we did that was, again, a little more advanced is if somebody came to our website through this tool called demandbase.com, we implemented that solution on our website. And when a restaurant franchisor on our list came to our website, they saw a totally different homepage. So the restaurant franchisors saw this page about Unleash Restaurant Performance. But if you were a retailer, you saw, improve retail sales, right? You said it with a different image, not a chef in the image, you had a retail salesperson. So this level of personalization and customization of the message went all the way down to even what people saw when they came to our generic website. It's possible to do these things today using today's tools and components. And I think we are almost out of time here, so I'm going to take a few more questions, and then I've given you enough to at least tease you, I think, about ABM. Go to demandgen.com, demandbase.com. If you're interested and you think this might be relevant, you can find out a lot more. Marianne. You had a question? Oh, I thought I saw your hand pop up there for a second. Any questions from anybody, actually, whether it's on ABM or on anything we've talked about today?
I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you say it was demand base was the software that you put on your website in order to change the homepage?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Let me take a look here. There we go.
And then does it do that through like a cold email outreach? Is that how you do it? You put it in the link?
Let me just double check. Yeah, this is definitely it. And well, how it does it is basically the IP address. It has a database of the IP addresses of every company in North America and many global companies. And so it knows if somebody comes in from that company's IP address or one of their IP addresses, then it knows, oh, this person's coming from Subway, from inside the Subway system. Let's shoot them a homepage, of the 8 different choices that we had. We'll give them the homepage about restaurant franchisors. So that's how it does it. Basically, they've got a database of all of the IPs. Now, if the CEO of Subway logged in at home behind his VPN, he wouldn't get the restaurant website. He'd just get the generic website, which is fine. The generic homepage is perfectly fine, right? But if we do know where he's coming from, then he would get exactly the right web experience for him, which is pretty powerful when you think about it.
It's very powerful. So I guess the issue we would have is if we were going after a school board as opposed to like an individual school.
Yeah.
Both coming from the same.
Yeah. And I would say probably considering the complexity of doing this, that might not be worth that approach, but I would still do the outbound account-based marketing because you do understand what's the school board's priorities of this year versus another one. You could create customized messaging. And folks, I hate to say it, but we are out of time. It's been a fun 3 weeks, a good session today. Good to, I think, get to meet most of you over the last few weeks. I know, Thierry, you're going to be sending out links to some of this content shortly, and it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you so much, Blaine.
Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
I know most have connected on LinkedIn already. Please feel free to do that.
Thank
Me
you,
a
Blaine.
message at any point in time, and happy to help where I can. Toodaloo.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.